What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham G.S. and Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network, and today we're talking the latest episode of WWE Untold, entitled The Phenom and The Legend Killer, of course covering the rivalry between Randy Orton and The Undertaker from 2005. Now, I've been looking forward to this Untold for a while now. They announced this a couple of weeks ago as part of the whole 30 years of The Undertaker month on the network, starting at Hell in a Cell, because this aired on Sunday after the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view, but it really went live that Monday. Or, I'm sorry, that Sunday morning, and now they're going to be covering more content like the Undertaker and Kane rivalry, I think. He's going to be on the Stone Cold Broken Skull Sessions podcast again for a part 2, right after Survivor Series in a couple of weeks. So there's a lot to look forward to in the network, Undertaker-related content. This kind of kicked the whole thing off. And the timing was perfect, too, for a few different reasons. The Untolds are usually really, really good about anniversaries. For example, they did one on the Sasha Bayley match from Brooklyn, from TakeOver Brooklyn 1, on the exact 5-year anniversary. They did an Untold on Kurt Angle versus Shawn Michaels from WrestleMania 21 on the exact 15-year anniversary. Now, this didn't coincide with any anniversary aside from the 30 years of Taker next month, but it did, this year does mark the 15-year anniversary of their entire feud from 2005, and it went up, it kind of covered not largely, but it did culminate inside Hell in a Cell, and Sunday was the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view, so it kind of worked in more ways than one. And on that same day, Randy Orton became the new WWE Champion, main eventing Hell in a Cell, and winning the WWE Championship, so I guess it kind of all happens for a reason. But we kicked this thing off with Orton talking about how he learned what a receipt was and working with Undertaker. Now, they don't cover this later on, because usually in the beginning of these episodes, they kind of give you a preview of what's going to be featured later on in the episode. This was only featured at the very beginning here, before they even showed the title card of what this episode was called. And it was from a segment on SmackDown during their feud. I don't know if it was September, October, I don't remember. But Orton hit Taker with a chair, twice, I think. And this was back when they were doing unprotected chair shots, which was so fucking dumb. And the way they were doing them wasn't killing the people. I mean, maybe slowly, I don't know. But, they might have been protected, but, they weren't doing a very good job of protecting the chair shots. To the point where Orton hit Taker, by accident on, the bridge of his nose and cut him open big time. Made him bleed a lot. Orton felt really, really bad. And Taker said, "Your receipt's coming." And Orton's like, "Oh, shit." So remember that for later on in the review. We kicked the actual episode off with Orton talking about his OVW run. He was there only for about 6 to 8 months, I guess, before he was called up. They ran primarily smaller shows, but they had their WrestleMania, so to speak. I don't know how many people were there or where it was. I think he mentioned that, but he wrestled Rico on the show for their biggest show of the year, I guess. Again, their version of WrestleMania. That's really not what was noteworthy here. The point of this was that on that same show, Batista, who was known as the Leviathan, I don't know if he was Dave Batista, I think he was just the Leviathan, faced The Undertaker. Now, I don't know how I didn't know that, maybe I've heard that before, but these guys went from facing each other on an OVW show in 01, 02, to then facing each other at WrestleMania 5 years later, at WrestleMania 23, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. And Orton said that he actually introduced himself to Taker that night. He doesn't remember exactly what their conversation was, but he did introduce himself to Taker. And Taker sold actually a lot for Batista. He sold a lot for the Leviathan, because Taker talks about how he really wants to help that next generation. And the business will not grow unless you build up that next crop of superstars, So Taker wasn't really worried about his spot. A lot of people wouldn't help out those younger guys because they were worried about their spots. Luckily, Taker was in a position where his spot was not going anywhere, especially over 10 years in. He debuted in 90. This was 01, 02. He was almost 12 years in. His spot wasn't going anywhere, so he didn't really have to worry about that. So he's always been a guy to put to always put the business first before his own agenda. Bruce Pritchard, that is, calls Undertaker a measuring stick for success in WWE, and Orton found that out very quickly during the course of their feud. But even before then, Orton debuted on the main roster on SmackDown in 2002. They actually had a match, I guess, which I saw a clip of on the WWE YouTube channel, their first ever one-on-one match on SmackDown, I think, in 02. Long before the 05 stuff, they had a match on SmackDown when Orton was still a rookie. And obviously, Taker won easily, but it was a WWE title match, which is crazy. It might have been around the time that Taker was doing the whole, I don't want to say rookie killer gimmick, but he was facing Jeff Hardy. He was facing Maven that year. He faced Orton in this match. Pretty sure he faced John Cena around that time too, so he was really helping out the younger guys. So he debuts in 02, had a great 03 as part of Evolution, Orton did. Won the World Heavyweight Championship in 04, becoming the youngest world champion in WWE history as a result. And then it was around that time, or actually it was really in late 03 as part of Evolution, but they kind of say it came afterward, that he came up with the Legend Killer gimmick. And someone approached Orton. He said it might have been Bruce Pritchard that told Orton, hey, Taker wants to work with you. And he's like, what? Like, obviously, you're not going to believe it when you first hear it. So that was going into WrestleMania 21. Orton says that the streak wasn't really a thing yet. So when he claimed that he was going to be the first one to beat Taker at WrestleMania, it was kind of a big deal. Maybe the streak wasn't as big as it would become years later, like a year or two later. But the streak, I think, was definitely a thing by 05. The guy was 12-0. I mean, I've never been able to actually pinpoint exactly when the streak became as big as it was. Not as big, but like when people started to mention, like, oh, Taker's actually undefeated at WrestleMania. I mean, I'm going back to like 02. I think Ric Flair had even brought that up. Like, hey, you're undefeated at WrestleMania, blah, blah, blah. You're like 9-0. I think that was the thing even back at WrestleMania 18. It was definitely a thing for like the Kane match at WrestleMania, for the Big Show and A-Train match at WrestleMania 19. Or 20, rather. Their match came first in 19. The Kane match was at WrestleMania 20. I'm almost positive, and I might be wrong. But either way, it wasn't as big as it would become until after this Orton match in 05. Now, they don't say that Taker wanted to put over Orton. I think I've heard that somewhere, that Orton was supposed to beat Taker, and then Vince didn't want the streak to end. But I'm pretty sure Orton, and the way that Taker talks about him here, it seems pretty evident how high he was on Orton, that he probably would have lost to him if that was what the decision was, which I guess it wasn't. But Taker probably wanted to lose. He didn't say that here in this documentary. I guess it would kind of take away from like the kayfabe part of it, I guess, even though this is really behind the scenes stuff. But anyway, so Orton had said, I'm going to be the first one to beat Undertaker. So that slap, that when he slapped Taker on SmackDown, that was what really set the feud off. And Taker told him, hey, really lay in that slap. It's got to feel real. It's got to look real. It's got to be intense, because you got to get people invested in this rivalry. And Orton, prior to that point, was still a babyface. He turned face after the Evolution split, after he split away from Evolution, won the World Championship. Wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire as a babyface. People were cheering him, but he's always been more comfortable as a heel. So they had to turn him heel for the program, which was absolutely the best, thing to do, the best course of action to take here with this feud, especially being the Legend Killer too. I'm not sure if he was doing that in late 04, but he went back to it for the Taker feud. So he really had to piss people off. And the way to do that, the way they figured out how to do that, was to RKO Stacy Keibler, who I guess he was doing an on-air like relationship type of thing with. I don't remember. I wasn't watching at that point, and I don't really remember like a lengthy storyline that he had with Stacy. But he RKO'd Stacy. He was very likable, and that's what pissed people off and turned him heel. And Pritchard even brought up that he knows how to be a dick. He can be a dick sometimes because he knows how to be a dick. And even Orton says, heel, I was back to being a bad guy. I was back to where my element was. I was back in my element. Being a heel is always where I've been my most comfortable. So they fast forward to the WrestleMania match at WrestleMania 21. Taker talks about the pressure that's always on with it being WrestleMania. And that was the match where Bob Orton returned. Randy's father, Cowboy Bob Orton, the first appearance that he's made on WWE TV. I mean, he was actually, I think he went into the Hall of Fame that year. So, I mean, he was already, I guess, there anyway, and they kind of decided to use him. So Orton was really happy to work with his father. Bob was really happy to work with his son. I guess he had actually worked with his father many years earlier. So it was kind of cool to pass the torch to his own son and do that on TV, let alone at WrestleMania. And Taker had a lot of respect for Bob. I'm not sure if they were able to work together in WWE. I don't think so, because Taker debuted in 90, and Bob was around in like the mid-80s in WWE, so they probably did, I just don't remember. But Taker had a lot of respect for Bob, calls him a great heel, one of the greatest heels to ever do it, which is high praise coming from him. And Orton remembers seeing his dad smile in a way that he's never seen him smile before, just being involved in the match, in the company, and doing his thing, doing something that he loves. I thought that was really cool. So they really wanted to fit the RKO in there. And Orton had said the RKO isn't established yet. I mean, it's 05. I don't buy that for a second. People knew what the RKO was as far back as I would say 03, definitely 04. In 05, it was absolutely an established move. It wasn't on the level that it is today as this ultra finisher that no one really kicks out of. But people, I mean, it was definitely a known finisher. So they wanted to fit it in there. There really wasn't a spot that made sense until they came up with the spot to do the chokeslam into the RKO, which looked amazing. It's still one of the greatest RKOs ever. People still talk about it to this day. It's featured in every video package when it comes to like WrestleMania and stuff like that. And Orton credits Taker for helping to get that move over. Had it not been for Taker, that move may not have gotten over in Orton's opinion. So Taker again praises Orton, says that he just understands the business. Orton does. He gets the storytelling part of the business. And it was a great match, and Orton just understood that to tell a great story was really all that was important. So I think Orton went for the tombstone, Taker reversed it, which they actually went back to that spot at Armageddon, which was cool, and I'll get to that later at the end of the review when we talk about the Hell in a Cell Armageddon match. So Taker wins. He's 12-0, I think, at WrestleMania. And that was it until they started the build to the rematch at SummerSlam. Now, Orton moved over to SmackDown in the draft, the lottery that summer, and they rekindled the rivalry going into SummerSlam. They knew they wanted the dad to get involved again because he worked so well the first time around at WrestleMania 21. So they're like, we want to get the dad back involved in the match. So I thought this was a great story. Orton wanted the same makeup artist. They were going to put Bob in the front row, and he was going to jump over the barricade and interfere in the match. But obviously, he looks like Cowboy Bob. People would remember what he looks like. He was just a WrestleMania, so you can't just have him sitting out there normally. You got to put makeup on him. Orton remembered the segment they did from years earlier, and that was about 3 years earlier, with 3-minute warning on SmackDown, Eric Bischoff, Chuck and Billy, like the wedding that they had on the show, and how Bischoff was made to look like this completely different person. One of the greatest segments in SmackDown history, one of the greatest reveals, whatever. It was amazing. So Orton said he wanted that same makeup artist for his dad, and they brought him back. I guess it was the same person. They didn't say otherwise. I thought he would say, oh, we couldn't get him, so we got someone else. Because this person did a terrible job. Or, like, Randy said it was bad. His dad said it was bad. Taker even called it terrible. It was not a great disguise. I mean, it wasn't awful, but it wasn't great. You could definitely tell it was Cowboy Bob Orton. And Orton even, I mean, the reveal sucked, Orton said, because everyone already knew it was him. Bob helped Randy win that night. And then Orton just looks at the camera and goes, makeup artist, if you're watching this, thanks for fucking nothing. And obviously they bleep out the fucking part, but I thought that was funny. So then they discussed the casket match from No Mercy 2005. Taker said it made sense for it to be a handicap match because his dad was very much involved in the rivalry. So they made it a 2-on-1 handicap match. And they talk about Cowboy Bob Orton's gear, quote unquote, because he was wearing like this normal, like loose, baggy shirt, and Bob said he wore it to hide his belly. He wore these really loose jeans, and Taker was not happy. He wished he wore tighter clothes because he didn't want to beat someone up who looked like he was about to mow the lawn. That's what Taker said. I thought that was really funny. So the Ortons win. Bob and Randy win by putting Taker in the casket. They drag the casket to the top of the stage, and that's when Orton started just drowning it in kerosene, okay? This I did not know. I don't know if a lot of people knew this, but Orton was so into the moment, was so fired up, that he was just dumping this thing all over the place, including on himself by accident. So when he lit the thing on fire with the lighter and lit the casket ablaze, and it was a great visual, he almost lit himself on fire because his boots were soaked. He was completely soaked with kerosene. He was like inches away, he said, from getting lit up in fire. Just barely missed getting lit on fire, which is unbelievable, but it was a great visual nonetheless. So we fast forward to Survivor Series. Taker takes time off. He disappears from the show. Orton is the sole survivor for SmackDown at the 05, the Raw versus SmackDown elimination tag team match, which was a great match. I remember that being a really, really good match. So Orton was the sole survivor, I say the SmackDown roster, but it was like all the undercard losers, which told you right there something was about to go down, and they were just going to get the shit kicked out of them. So sure enough, the gong goes off, the crowd goes nuts, and Taker says there's pops and then there's rumbles, like with anticipation as far as what's about to happen, and that was a rumble, he said. Not the Royal Rumble, but a rumble reaction-wise, and it was. So Taker was all like fucking pumped up. He came out of the casket was like propped up, lit on fire. He came out of it, which I completely forgot about. And he was so like fired up, literally, and not literally, but figuratively, no pun intended, that he thought for a second when he came out of the casket, he just hoped for a second he had to like assess whether he was on fire or not. Because he couldn't tell, he was so fired up. Again, not literally, but figuratively, that he wouldn't have known if he was on fire or not. We don't want a repeat of what would happen 5 years later at Elimination Chamber 2010, when he got lit on fire during his entrance, and that guy that was responsible for it was never seen again. So, at any rate, it was a great moment. Taker comes out, just completely destroys the roster. Literally everybody. Bob was out there. I'm not sure if Bob got attacked, but all the jabrones, Sylvain Grenier, Brian Kendrick, Nunzio, Paul London, all the losers, just got completely squashed, which was great. So then they did another stunt on SmackDown soon after, where I think it was in late November, because they jumped around a little bit here with something else, and I'll get to it later on. I think I'm looking at my notes right now, because there was a segment from like September that they showed, and it was after Survivor Series. I'm like, why are they showing it? Maybe it was this one. No, it was the casket thing where like they showed Taker's body and it was him, like in the casket or something. That was really stupid. I mean, obviously it was a tape show. They didn't explain how they did it, but it was pretty obvious that they just taped two different shots, one of Taker in the casket and one of Taker facing Orton on SmackDown or whatever it was. I just thought that was dumb. And then Taker came out of the casket during a funeral later on. It was stupid. So anyway, the other stunt they talk about in depth was the one right after Survivor Series, which this was November. That one was September. Right after Survivor Series, I think Orton or Taker was facing like JBL or something. And then Orton attacked him, put him in the back of his car. And it was like an open car. I don't know what kind of car it was. I'm not great with cars. But it was an open car. Taker, you've definitely seen this spot before where Orton drapes Taker's just motionless body over the back of the car and drives it backwards into the set piece in that great like oval shaped, like it was like a half circle. Again, if you see it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So Orton had said that they had to have a stunt coordinator for it. And what you didn't see on TV, because SmackDown was taped back then, was that Orton had to flood the engine. And the guy was like, lay off the gas. So he finally got the car to like get going, which was just hilarious seeing the footage for it, that we've never seen this before. So anyway, he had a couple inches on each side of the car so he didn't get wrecked with the set piece. And I saw this stunt a couple days ago on WWE's YouTube channel. I'm thinking, how the fuck did these guys not get wrecked? You know what I mean? Like, it was a pretty dangerous spot, but even Taker said, you're not really thinking about that. You're not really thinking about that when it's live, and you just really don't. You just hope that nothing bad happens, but you're not really worried about that when it's live. You just go out there and do it. So he just barely hit it. He got it directly on the set piece. No one was hurt, seriously, I guess, which is good. So Orton said, what would Vince say? It was good shit. So I thought that was funny. The long angle from early 05 to December, it was literally like a year-long feud between Taker and Orton, built a Hell in a Cell at Armageddon. This was back when Hell in a Cell still meant something. In between this one and Batista Triple H at Vengeance 6 months earlier, 05 was a great year for Hell in a Cell matches. Maybe even the best. Because they had 2 cell matches that year that were absolutely fantastic. And then when Taker made his entrance, Orton had that look on his face, like, I'm ready for war, and he wasn't scared. And Taker really praised Orton's facial expressions as if, like, he got it. Like, he understood what to do, why it made sense, why his facial expressions were so key, were so instrumental in building up anticipation for the match. And that's exactly what they were able to do here. Orton says that the first thing that he thinks of when he thinks of Taker is respect. That's how much respect he has for the dead man. And Taker said his goal at that match was to make Orton look good. And he says that eternal competition is what makes matches good. And Taker told him beforehand, listen, it's a Hell in a Cell match. It's your first one. I've been in a bunch. It's going to be snug. It's going to be violent, but we're going to be safe. And we might bust each other open. Like, it's going to be a pretty violent match, but I'm going to make sure I don't, like, seriously hurt you. And Taker does not forget. So here's where the receipt comes in that I mentioned at the start of the review. Taker just blasts him over the face with a chair. And again, these chair shots are fucking reckless. I'm glad they're not doing shit like this anymore because it's so dumb. But he did it as a receipt for what Orton did to him by accident a couple of months earlier. Whatever. So Orton knew it was coming. Orton was like, oh shit. And Orton said he learned in that moment to always take care of your opponent, which I thought was great. And they talk about being in the moment, being fired up, all the spots they did with the steel steps and everything else. It was really, really good. Taker praised Orton's instincts, and Orton talked about how he kind of had to come up with original stuff to do, because everything's been done at one point or another, and this is even in 05. Like, nowadays, it's even harder 15 years later, and we get fucking 3 matches inside Hell in a Cell on the same show. But back then it was difficult. Not as difficult as it is today, but back then it was still tough to do original, innovative stuff inside the cell. And that's exactly what they did. So they utilized Bob Orton, and Bob was involved, and Taker could tell that Cowboy was having fun, which was really cool, and Cowboy Bob Orton was just happy to be involved. So he got involved in the cell. It wasn't technically a handicap match, but in a way it was, because Bob ended up getting involved. So they had never done a spot before, I guess. Taker had never done a spot before where his tombstone had been reversed. Now, we've seen it a few times since then. I know Triple H did it at least 1 or 2 times at a WrestleMania. Definitely WrestleMania 27. I'm not sure about WrestleMania 28 and who else has done it, but I remember Triple H did it, but Orton did it too. And he might have been the first one to do it. It's not reversed often. So it was a pretty big deal for Orton to do it, and it did not look great at all. Just because Orton was a lot shorter than Taker. I mean, Orton's a tall guy, but it just wasn't good. I mean, it didn't seriously hurt him, which was good, but it was still a cool idea, at least in my opinion. As far as like how it was like just didn't come across well, but it was still cool. So it was weird for Taker, he said, to take the move, just a very unnatural feeling because he's always the one to do the move. He knows how to deliver it, knows where to put his hands, know how much force to use, blah blah blah. So Taker ended up, Taker kicked out of it obviously, and ended up firing back up and hit both Ortons, not at the same time, but one to Bob Orton, one tombstone to Bob, and then another tombstone to Randy Orton. And then that's how he picked up the win for the match. So Taker going to the top of the cell afterward was not planned. It was just kind of like a heat of the moment type of thing. So he went to the top of the cell afterward, celebrated, and it made for a really, really cool moment. Orton looks back and says that he thinks he was really, really lucky to be in a spot like that. And Pritchard praises Orton as being a great veteran, blah, blah, blah. So Orton shares one more story at the end here and says that the night of, or the day before WrestleMania 21, or the night of, or whatever, it might have been like the morning of, because it was like around Hall of Fame time, Orton missed the rehearsal for the WrestleMania 21 match, which, I mean, they went on to work for a year after this. You could tell that Orton was, given a lot of respect and a lot of leeway from Taker and other people. John Laurinaitis was there. He was an agent for the match. Ricky Steamboat was an agent for the match. He was there. His dad was there, and Taker was there, and maybe one other person. And Orton missed it because didn't say exactly, but he was probably partying. He overslept. He got into some trouble the night before, so he overslept. He got there just as they were finishing up, and he thanks Taker here for not cursing him out, and which he probably should have, let's be honest. That's a pretty big thing to miss. But he really appreciated that Taker didn't do that. And one of his biggest regrets to this day, he said, and it's not just a funny story that he tells. He tells it for a reason. He said one of his biggest regrets in his career to date is letting those men down that night, including his own dad and especially Taker. And he gets emotional talking about it. He said, none of my career would have happened had it not been for The Undertaker, and I really appreciate Taker for everything he did. You could tell he was really emotional. He was very close with Taker, which is cool. Taker said that he was handed a gift when Vince gave him that character to be The Undertaker, and he's realized its importance over the last 30 years. And he's blessed he's been able to do it for so long. And he said, I've lived a very blessed life over the last 30 years, and I take nothing for granted. And that was the end of the episode. Really, really great stuff here. I absolutely love this. The Taker-Orton feud is so underrated. 05 had, Triple H and Batista. They had John Cena and JBL, which was a good feud. Eddie and Ray had a really, really good feud, which they also did an Untold on. Shawn Michaels and Kurt, which they did an Untold on. They had a lot of Untolds in the year 05 because it was a great year for WWE, I would say. Matt Hardy and Edge was another one that year, another feud from 05. And this was close to being one of the best. They had a lot of great matches, really solidified Orton as the main eventer. And yeah, he was already previously a world champion, but he very could have easily won that title, dropped it, and never gotten it back again. But this Taker feud, proved that he was a main eventer and he belonged on that level, which I completely agree with. So yeah, definitely check this out right now on the WWE Network. WWE Untold, The Phenom and The Legend Killer. It clocks in at around 40, 45 minutes, 42, 43 minutes or something like that. Well worth it. Definitely great stuff. Absolutely check it out when you get a chance. And thank you guys for checking out the video. I appreciate it. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. Check out the description box for more WWE Untold reviews. Hit that bell button as well to be notified for more daily content and every time a new video goes up, including tomorrow. And we had 2 videos go up today. We're probably going to have 2 videos go up tomorrow, too, a lot like Monday and today. Where not only is hashtag AskGSM episode, I think 261 going up. I think it's, or not 261, 361. But also very likely my exclusive interview with Cameron Grimes. Cameron Grimes from WWE NXT. He's got a Halloween Havoc match coming up tomorrow night. A Haunted House of Terror match with Dexter Lumis. So I'm looking to put that, I don't usually put up the audio of the interviews unless it's for Bleacher Report, but I'll probably put that up tomorrow, too. And you can check it out. So check out my exclusive interview tomorrow, probably, very likely, ahead of Halloween Havoc with Cameron Grimes. And then Hashtag AskGSM episode 361 as well. Have a great one, guys. I'm Graham GSM Matthews. Enjoy your week, and I'll catch your ass down the road.